Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, tensions remain high along Israel's northern border after 2 rockets from Syria landed in the Golan Heights. The IDF returned artillery fire and obliterated the area from where the hostile enemy attack originated. The Israeli army has been bolstering its forces in the north following an alleged attack by Israeli helicopter gunships earlier this month that killed 6 senior Hezbollah terrorists and a top Iranian general. The terror group was involved in planning kidnappings, rocket and mortar attacks, and other assaults on military and civilian targets in northern Israel. Lieutenant General Hossein Salameh, the deputy head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, has threatened to attack Israel from Palestinian-controlled areas in Judea and Samaria in retaliation for the airstrike. Hezbollah boss Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah also said his terror organization would respond to the attack when the time was right.
The Iranian and Lebanese saber rattling did not go unnoticed in Israel. Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said that attempts to destabilize the northern border will not be tolerated and that all provocations will be met with force. Ya'alon warned both Lebanon and Syria, saying that they would be held responsible for any attacks emanating from their countries. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Benny Gantz also toured the Northern Command headquarters. Afterwards, he said that the security forces were alert, primed, and prepared for any action required of them.
Satellite images of a new Iranian missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead were released just one day after U.S. President Barack Obama vowed in his State of the Union message to veto any attempt to ratchet up sanctions against Tehran over its rogue atomic program. The 27-meter-long rocket, which has the ability to deliver a nuclear weapon far beyond Europe, was photographed at a site close to Tehran. Analysts said the missile can be used to launch spacecraft, satellites, or nuclear warheads. Israel has long warned that a nuclear-armed Iran is not only a threat to the Jewish state, but also poses a great danger to Europe and the United States.
The U.S. military is getting more involved in the strife-torn Middle East. The first contingent of about 100 American Special Operations Forces has been deployed in countries near Syria to begin training opposition fighters. In the coming weeks, the number of Americans involved in the mission will swell to 1,000 or more. Pentagon officials say that several foreign countries will also send military personnel to assist in the exercises. The U.S. hopes to have the first recruits trained and ready to return to Syria by the end of the year.
Islamic State terrorists beheaded one of 2 Japanese hostages after Tokyo refused to pay a $200 million ransom. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the murder of Haruna Yukawa was an outrageous and unacceptable terrorist act. The violent jihadi group said it was willing to exchange the remaining hostage for an Iraqi female terrorist held in a Jordanian prison. The woman has been identified as Sajida al-Rishawi. She was arrested in 2005 in Amman, Jordan, after her suicide bomb vest failed to detonate. However, her husband's bomb vest did explode, killing 36 people.
The Obama administration still cannot bring itself to denounce radical Islam. The latest case in point involves U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Obama's foreign policy point man told a gathering at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that the West should be careful about labeling those who cite Islam as justification for their killing innocent men, women, and children in Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, and other parts of the world as Islamic radicals. Kerry even said that it would be a mistake to link Islam to this criminal conduct or to blame Muslims for these violent acts.
Last week, the world paused to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Over 90 Israeli missions abroad helped organize ceremonies and events to honor the 6 million Jews who were murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators. The main commemoration was held at Auschwitz and coincided with the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the death camp by Russian troops on January 27, 1945. However, by that time, some 1 million Jews had already been killed at the extermination camp. This year's theme was Liberty, Life, and the Legacy of the Holocaust Survivors. 300 survivors of Auschwitz attended the moving ceremony. It was especially poignant, with some participants remarking that most likely this will be the last time that many of them will be alive to mourn the dead they left behind. Ronald Lauder, president of the World Jewish Congress, said Auschwitz is important because it was ground zero of what the Nazis did. And it is important because anti-Semitism is like a virus. You think it goes away, but then it comes back. The WJC president asserted that the Nazis were emboldened in their treatment of the Jews by the silence of the world. He then blasted the international community for standing by silently today while Christians are being killed throughout the Middle East.
A survey of Germans taken just before the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz revealed some interesting findings. 58% said that they believe it is time to move on, saying that the past should be consigned to history. 48% of the respondents said that their opinion of Israel is poor, and 62% of Germans view the government of Israel in a negative light.
France was the most dangerous country for Jews last year. An annual Israeli state report presented to the Knesset in Jerusalem reveals that the number of anti-Semitic incidents in France was nearly 1,000 in 2014. That's a 100% rise over the previous year. The attacks included assaults, many described as extremely violent, as well as attacks on synagogues and other Jewish institutions. Most of the attacks were carried out by radical Muslims rather than neo-Nazis or other right-wing hate groups. The study was released just 2 days ahead of World Holocaust Remembrance Day. The President of Israel traveled to the United States to take part in ceremonies marking the occasion. Aaron has more on that story.
Yes, Yochanan. In his first visit to the United States since becoming President of Israel, Reuven Rivlin was invited to the United Nations to address a special session of the General Assembly on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. However, the gathering had to be postponed by 1 day because of the blizzard that hit the New York area. Rivlin discussed the need to combat the alarming rise of anti-Semitism worldwide. He stressed that the State of Israel is not compensation for the Holocaust, but the Holocaust proved beyond any doubt why there is a need for the State of Israel. During the 5-day trip, Rivlin also held talks with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. He told the UN chief that terrorism has left no corner of the globe immune. Rivlin also laid a wreath at the 9/11 memorial and visited the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where he emphasized the importance of the strong bond between the United States and Israel. Rivlin's first stop in New York was to the Christian Cultural Center, where thousands of African American Christians gave the Israeli president a warm and enthusiastic welcome. Rivlin also visited with members of the Hispanic and American Jewish communities.
We have a follow-up to a story we reported on last week. The mystery surrounding the death of Argentine federal prosecutor Alberto Nisman continues to engulf the South American country. Nisman was found dead in his apartment just 1 day before he was scheduled to testify in Parliament and present a report about the 1994 bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires that killed 85 people and injured more than 200. Authorities who were quick to claim that Nisman killed himself have now been forced to backtrack on those allegations. Among those now saying it does not appear that Nisman took his own life is Argentine President Cristina Fernandez. Just days before his death, Nisman had accused the president of conducting secret back-channel dealings with Iran to cover up Tehran's involvement in the bombing in order to gain access to Iranian oil needed to help reduce Argentina's $7 billion per year energy deficit. 10 members of Nisman's security detail have been suspended pending completion of an investigation into their actions on the day the prosecutor was killed. President Fernandez has denied she colluded with Iran. And last week, the reporter who broke the news of Nisman's death fled Argentina because he believes his life is in danger. Damian Pachter of the Buenos Aires Herald said his phone had been tapped and he noticed suspicious persons following him. Pachter holds Israeli citizenship and caught a flight to Tel Aviv, saying he feels safe in Israel.
The Knesset Christian Allies Caucus and the World Jewish Congress held the 9th annual Night to Honor Our Christian Allies last week. This year, organizers chose to award Leif Wellerope, the Norwegian Christian leader who has stood as a strong advocate for the Jewish state for over 30 years and has spearheaded numerous humanitarian projects in Israel. The late Dr. Miles Monroe was also honored posthumously for his contribution to Israeli tourism. The founder of the Bahamas Faith Ministries International died in a tragic plane crash last year. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful sunny day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Pastor Cheaty. He's from the Redeemed Christian Church of God. Pastor Cheaty, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
A lot of people know about the church here because of Pastor Adeboye, who runs the church. He's a big supporter of Israel. But tell our viewers a little bit about the Redeemed Christian Church of God.
Yeah, the Redeemed Christian Church of God actually started in 1952 in Nigeria, in the city of Lagos, by a young man who actually didn't go to school. He wasn't literate. And then after some time he died, and then before he died he had actually done a transition to Pastor Adeboye, who was coming from one of the biggest universities in Nigeria as a lecturer of mathematics. And so in 1981 Pastor Adeboye took over the leadership of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, and since he took over we've had this tremendous phenomenal growth all over the world.
You know, if you walk through the streets of Jerusalem, you'll hear people talking about Nigeria. Everyone's excited about Nigeria because just last month, Nigeria was the vote in the Security Council of the United Nations that stopped the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
How come Nigeria, why did Nigeria vote for Israel?
Yeah, I think we need to look at it historically, you know, in terms of the African continent and Israel. You know, it took quite a long time for Israel and a lot of the African countries to establish diplomatic relationship. I think Nigeria sort of re-established relationship with Israel in 1985. And the interesting thing was, when we did that in Nigeria, the military president was a Muslim. And since then, I think Nigeria has been one of the biggest supporters of Israel. And then because also the evangelical movement is growing so well in Nigeria, so a lot of people are really supporters of Israel in Nigeria. And so when it came for Nigeria to vote for Israel, it was very easy for the president to take and make that decisions. And I think Israel must also realize now that they're gradually losing supporters from Europe. So they need to begin to build new partnership with the African continent.
Like Israel, Nigeria is in a war against radical Islam. You have the horrible Boko Haram attacking Christians all over Nigeria. Why isn't the government of Nigeria able to stop this?
Well, I think when this whole thing started a few years back, I think the government thought it was something they could easily nip in the bud, and nobody paid serious attention to it until it became a Frankenstein monster. And now we have to contend with a huge problem, particularly in the northeastern part of Nigeria, where we have actually lost swaths of land that is the size of Belgium and Holland to this ragtag Boko Haram terrorist group.
You know, weeks ago, radical Islam attacked Paris, France, and killed 17 people. The response was millions of people coming out to the street, world leaders condemning it. Yet on the same day as those attacks, 2,000 people were slaughtered in Nigeria, and almost no media coverage, no responses from world leaders. Why the double standard?
I think, well, I wouldn't say it's double standard, because charity begins at home. Now, we have to first of all take a sense of ownership of what is going on in Nigeria to attract world attention. For example, a few months ago, exactly 9 months today, about 279 young girls were kidnapped from the secondary school, and it took the government over 40 days to respond to that. And then eventually when the government responded, we had support even from Israel. We had support from the Western world, who actually came to see how they could help rally support and bring those girls back. But as I'm speaking to you right now, the girls are still abducted.
So what is the future to this problem with Boko Haram? Is there going to be a massive military response, or are people just unsure that the government can deal with this?
Josh, let me take you back to when I lived in Singapore. You know, Singapore also had issues with terrorism. They had a group called Jamal Islamiyah, which is very predominant in Southeast of Asia. But what the Singapore government did was actually to quickly nip the terrorist activity in the bud. And so it didn't rear its ugly head. Unlike the situation back home, we didn't nip it in the bud. Now it's become so huge a problem for the government to even contend with. And right now, as I speak to you, I'm not too sure we're making any progress with.
You represent the Redeemed Christian Church of God. It's growing with millions of members all over the world, and you're actually been living in Tel Aviv for 3 years.
Yeah.
What is the reason that there is a branch of this church here in Israel?
Yeah, okay, I think we need to also go back to history, permit me to use that word, because you can't talk about Christianity without talking about Israel. Because Israel is the land of the Bible. They give us the Bible. So every Christian, particularly in Nigeria, wants to be connected to Israel. And then my church organization has a vision to plant churches every 5 minutes walk in places like Nigeria and the other African countries. But for developed countries like Israel, our vision is to plant churches every 5 minutes drive, so that no one has an excuse why they wouldn't go to church, say, on a Sunday. You know, we've been able to achieve a measure of that in the United Kingdom, where we have over 1,000 centers, and even in the US, where we have over 750 centers also.
Pastor Cheaty, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Simple message. Just keep at it, and God would always be our greatest support and our greatest refuge.
Thank you, Pastor Cheaty, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
I would have never said a year ago that this would happen on my campus. 30-something% Jews, proud Jews, Zionists, you know, such strong Jewish and Israel community, pro-Israel communities. This would never happen. It happened. People were being, you know, verbally, maliciously attacked for saying, I believe in the right to a state of Israel. The anti-Israel sentiment has only escalated.
Nazi king! Nazi king!
The campus is going to become more and more polarized.
Things have just gotten a lot crazier and more negative on campus.
The negativity and the loudness, the abrasiveness on campus make it difficult for me to be open about supporting Israel.
A lot of students feel harassed and uncomfortable in their own living situation.
I don't think it's acceptable criticism of Israel when Israel becomes villainized, when Israel becomes the big bad devil.
You see these pamphlets that depict Jews with hooked noses and sucking children's blood, and I think that is classic anti-Semitism.
Students for Justice in Palestine hold an event called Israel Apartheid Week, where they lie about Israel for a week in a way that demonizes the state of Israel.
There's people who are pretending to be soldiers at checkpoints.
Filthy Arab, an Israeli life is worth more than all of you combined.
They were having a die-in, which is students lying, kind of pretending to be dead in the middle of campus. They're kind of trying to intimidate and frighten people on campus.
If we just look at the issues that people are focusing on, human rights issues in general, these are issues that are not even on par with the human rights violations that are happening in so many other places in the world.
The vote of 20 to 12 to 1 that passes.
Pro-Israel students who spoke at the Central Student Government vote faced threats from various groups.
All of these disparaging insults, accompanied by threats of violence, are messages that I and other members of Central Student Government have been receiving this past week.
Students were also called dirty Jews, things like this. Especially those on Central Student Government were called on the phone saying, "We know where you live, like vote with us or else."
To say that this is a non-violent, peaceful movement, I would seriously disagree, especially with the number of emails and harassing texts and harassing voicemails and harassing calls that have caused me to miss class for a week.
When there are times with high pressure, like during this divestment vote, students are definitely intimidated. A lot of the pro-Palestinian students were screaming and just very offensive towards the pro-Israel students who spoke at the meeting.
It's a little bit scary because I kind of never know how students will react to my pro-Israel sentiment. Even openly talking with other students on campus and professors especially.
So we can say this, and Hamas is a terrorist organization, sure. They also do great healthcare in kindergartens. But Hamas doesn't recognize Israel. So what?
You see it in Columbia, Saliba, Khalidi, Masad. They're all tenured professors, and they're all espousing their very anti-Israel and distorted views on the students.
As a student, the power dynamics are there. I feel powerless in a sense and very intimidated that these figures of authority and academic knowledge are basically invalidating everything I support.
They will stage a walkout, in some cases even curse at the speaker. They're notorious for doing this.
My only purpose today is that this event is shut down. Donnie Darwin speaks for Israeli apartheid. Donnie Darwin speaks for Israeli apartheid. Genocide in the hands of the IDF.
It sounds like it was a very specific thing that happened nationally. They had their very specific script that they were reading from a piece of paper about how Noni Darwish supports Israeli apartheid. It's nationally organized. It's not something that students came up with at UNM.
They're not saying, let's have these borders. They're saying, let's have all of Israel gone. Israel has no right to exist.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
What it essentially means is that from the river, meaning the Jordan River, to the sea, meaning the Mediterranean Sea, Palestine will be free, meaning all of Israel, as it currently exists, will be dissolved, and in its place will be a Palestinian state.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
For I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land.
Over the past 35 years, the International Christian Embassy have been actively engaged in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. More than 120,000 Jews have been helped by the Christian Embassy to come back from the four corners of the world here to the land of Israel. The main focal point was always the former Soviet Union, and the people which came to Israel were Russians or from the Ukraine or from Belarus. Today we see a major shift taking place where for the first time the majority of Jewish people which are coming to Israel do come from first world countries.
The Hebrew word aliyah refers to the immigration of Jews from the diaspora to the land of Israel. According to recent statistics published by the Jewish Agency for Israel, immigration to Israel continued to increase in 2014 by 32% overall. While aliyah numbers from Western Europe were up 177% in 2014, France alone saw its aliyah numbers increase by 289%.
I think that I can clearly tell you that there is a greater interest among French Jews to move to Israel, to make aliyah, or to consider aliyah. It is not an operation like an aliyah operation like we saw from countries like Ethiopia or Russia after the Iron Curtain was lifted, but we see here a great interest a great interest, and I believe this is something that is going to grow in this coming year.
Ukraine is another European country that has seen a significant increase in Aliyah in 2014. A struggling economy and continued tensions with Russia have contributed to many Ukrainian Jews considering the idea of moving to Israel. Penina Zubarev and her family made Aliyah from Ukraine in 2009. For the Zubarev family, starting a new life in Israel was a challenge.
Now it's a lot of Ukrainian Jews think about to leave Ukraine because it's so difficult time now to make money, to care about family. If you decide to leave Ukraine, you lose your Ukrainian citizenship and all benefits.
There is something in the atmosphere that is uncomfortable in some places, and people think, what do I do next? And I'm happy that the Jewish people consider Israel, their homeland, as the best alternative. If I can send a message to the Christian friends of Israel around the world is, please do two things. One thing is donate. Give the money that is necessary for the Israeli institutions to make the best way of Aliyah. And the second thing is to pray, because we need the prayers. We need to be in your hearts like we know we are already in, and we need to build this bridge of solidarity, working together for the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.
As you have seen, we are living in a very special time of human history. God is opening a unique window of opportunity for the global body of Christ to actively be involved with the return of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. Today, you personally can be involved with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. You can help the Jewish people to return back to the land of their fathers, like the prophets of old foretold. Your donation and your prayer can make sure that the prophetic destiny of the Jewish people will become a reality today. So I want to invite you today to pray for the Aliyah of the Jewish people. Pray for the work of the Christian Embassy as we help the Jewish people to return back, but also consider making a generous gift in order to help us to return Jewish people from France, from the Ukraine, back to the land of Israel. We need your support, we need your prayers. May the Lord bless you richly out of Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.